Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. Today is my pleasure to have as my guest Sydney Curtin. Sydney is a published author, songwriter, and serial entrepreneur, known for her executive-level work at the intersection of business strategy, leadership, and purpose-driven impact. As a highly sought-out business consultant, she brings strategy and growth to founders and organizations, is the CEO of multiple companies that she owns and operates, and a board member for the nonprofit organization Unplanned Good, where she helps shape national advocacy and mission-focused initiatives. Recognized for blending sharp business acumen with authentic storytelling, Sydney has built and led multiple ventures while maintaining a respected public presence. And above all, she is a mom of three, a role that anchors her leadership, influence, and long-term vision. And Sydney, somewhere in all of this, you must find some time to sleep.
Every once in a while, yes, believe it or not.
Like every other day?
Yes, it averages out to about 4 hours a night is what we get after between the kids waking up and alarms falsely going off, dogs, all of that stuff.
Yeah, you have a pretty full life. And we met, actually, it was through John Fletcher. I reached out to John because you're the co-host with John for the Common Good podcast, or Common Ground podcast, excuse me. I had Unplanned Good on my mind. So you're the you're the co-host of the Common Ground podcast with John Fletcher. And I reached out to John because I had some interest in being a guest. I was recently a guest on your podcast. We had a great conversation.
Fantastic.
Well, the thing I like about the Common Ground podcast is that you're open to different perspectives, and we can disagree, but we could do it in a way where we're listening to each other, where it's respectful, and we're all learning in the process. And that's the way I think your podcast should be a microcosm for how we operate in general.
I appreciate that. That was John's original goal when he founded the Common Ground Project USA and invited me to come be a host with him as well. We definitely bring different dynamics to the Common Ground podcast, and I think it makes us a really good team. It's been really fun for the year that we've been doing it now.
Yeah, well, and you've had some great guests, and you guys are making an impact. So I just wish you and John continued success with that. So
I appreciate it. It's so true what you said too, though, is that people just don't know how to have respectful disagreement. Disagreement for the sake of understanding and asking Socratic questions. This line of, I want to understand how you think versus propagate my agenda on your life. And so I have really enjoyed hearing people's different perspectives, your episode being a great example of that.
And yeah, it was just a lot of fun. So, but anyway, I got some questions for you regarding your own journey, and you've had quite an interesting journey. So we're going to talk about that. So my first question is, tell our listeners about the experience or experiences that have shaped your life path and your life passions today.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, it's loaded. I think that one of the things as parents that we experience when we get to this phase of raising toddlers is recognizing how easy it is for generational trauma to repeat itself. So raising kids is one of the biggest blessings, and it's also one of the biggest responsibilities. Some people call it, daunting, burdensome, busy. I mean, there's a lot of words that in some given moments are appropriate, but what it really is the biggest responsibility you'll be given to shape this little person's wiring, how they view love and relationships and how they make decisions, where their life path ultimately goes, all comes from how do you love them? How do you teach them to communicate? How do you teach them right from wrong? And my childhood experience was very traditional in that capacity. I was raised by parents that had a really rocky marriage. My mom struggled with a drug addiction that she lost her life to. And my dad had his own stuff, as we all do. So, no, nothing against him necessarily. It's taken me time to get there. But I mean, he didn't have a very stable father figure for a lot of years growing up, and that really affected his identity. Well, when I lost my mom, I was then raised by a single dad. I was the oldest of three, and I was the only girl. So that was definitely one major life event. The next one that really shaped me, and there's a lot, of course, that comes with that without going through all of the nitty gritty details and minute things. It was kind of just this domino effect of like it stacked up and stacked up and stacked up, and then it all came crashing down. My relationships were unstable. I drank a lot in high school and college. I didn't really understand what love was because I didn't have a healthy model for what that looked like. I didn't have a super grounded sense of how I defined faith or relationship with God, higher power, whatever you want to call that for the purpose of this episode. So when I would have been 20 years old. I was in an extremely abusive relationship to the point where he was actually arrested. He was put in Adams County Jail in Colorado, and there was a state enforced restraining order. He wasn't allowed to even come to the city that I lived. He was on and off probation for a long time after that. Well, the person who had introduced me to this individual was who at the time I called my best friend. Him and I went to a community college together. And so in my brokenness, my thought process was, well, he never would have wanted this for me. If he had known that this is how this person would treat me, he never would have introduced me to this person. As a result of that, I kind of ran back into the arms of my quote unquote best friend at the time. It was like, why would you put me in this situation? I didn't have a good relationship with my dad. It was shelter seeking, for lack of a better term. Well, I found out I was pregnant very, very shortly after with the best friend, not the guy who was in jail. When I told my dad, you can probably, as a father, imagine his reaction. You probably would have handled it better from what I know about you.
Mhm.
But the first words out of my dad's mouth were, well, we have to find an adoption agency. So that kind of set the trajectory for my journey from that day until where I am now. And I do have two other kids that I raise now as well. But
The first thing, that I thought about when you were talking about generational trauma and living in a home where your mom had challenges with substance use and addiction, and your dad was just, for whatever, was not emotionally or present for you. And early experience matters. And if the narrative isn't changed early, that perpetuates in relationships.
oh, absolutely.
And in a previous lifetime, which seems like a previous lifetime ago, I was an addictions counselor, and I talked with individuals who'd come from unhealthy home situations, and they would replicate the relationships that were modeled for them in the home. And they would say, Dave, I vowed that I would never have the same relationship as my parents had. Well, if the father was an abuser and the mother was the victim, it might have been the other way around.
Mm.
So the person I was working with might have been the victim and then been abused and vice versa. So it was always, yeah, I wanted to change, but healthy coping skills and communication skills weren't modeled for that to happen. So they did what they knew.
It's true that our nervous system often mistakes familiarity for safety.
Mm.
And I made a post about this just the other day. That was the cycle that I was trapped in, was mistaking familiarity for safety. And I was in these really toxic situations, really toxic relationships, because it was what was role modeled to me. So that felt familiar and therefore it felt safe. But it doesn't mean that, I mean, growth happens outside of our comfort zone, is the moral of that story.
Yeah, I think somebody mentioned on a podcast that growth never occurs out of really smooth sailing. You know,
That's
it's it's usually out of the challenges that inevitably are going to that we're going to be presented with in this lifetime, and it's how we respond to those. So, um, now let's get your daughter's name is Emberlyn. She's the daughter that you put up for adoption. Am I correct?
Yes, I placed
Okay.
Emberlyn for adoption in 2019, and I did name her. So that was my first gift to her, was her name.
That is a beautiful name. Was there a specific reason for picking that name? Is there a specific meaning behind that name? And
Yeah.
what is the inspiration that her
Kid
name provides you in life?
All of my kids have biblically inspired names, with the exception of my son has a direct name of a prophet as one of my favorite prophets. But so my dad used to say, while I was going through this pregnancy journey and getting out of this really toxic relationship with her biological dad, he used to say, never make any permanent decisions in a firestorm. And since day one, I had wanted to raise her. I wanted her more than anything in the world. I was trying to prevent generational trauma from repeating itself, which we will further get into. But that phrase just stuck with me because I thought about how I would explain this to her as she grew up. And at this time, I was not resolved in adoption. Like, I didn't decide until the day after she was born, actually. But I was going through this whole journey and I never wanted her to hear that she was a mistake. And so when my dad said, never make any permanent decisions while you're in a firestorm, I decided to use that as inspiration for her name. So Lynn means beautiful, and embers like ember from a fire. So her name informally means beautiful firestorm.
I like that. And your dad had a good point. You never make decisions or major decisions when you're in crisis.
Right.
Um, you wait till everything kind of settles down and you evaluate your options and you decide what to do. And that's why, as an addictions professional, I never made a suggestion to a psychiatrist about a potential clinical issue if that person was in crisis. You stabilize the crisis first and see if the behavior mitigates, and then you go from there.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so this was an open adoption with Emberlyn, am I correct? And I know this is kind of where the story begins and the story continues for you. So
Right.
talk about that whole process of open adoption,
Yeah.
what the challenges were like, what you're dealing with now with that. Give our audience an idea of the yin and yang of all of this.
Sure. So one of my biggest things was that I could not get full custody of my daughter with certainty prior to her being born. I knew that once she was born, I would not have the emotional fortitude to go through with an adoption, that if she came home with me, she was staying with me. And I was being fed all of these lies from my own family, his being biological dad, friends, church figures, whatever, about who I was, who he was, the toxicity of the situation. So my immediate reaction was, okay, I've got three choices here. I can move states and change my name. I can try to move states, change my name, single parent, live on the run style. I can go through with this adoption, or I can hope that I can win full custody of her in a court battle. But if I lose, I risk that he gets some form of custody of my daughter. And am I really okay with that? Like, will I be able to sleep at night knowing that she's safe with them if we're in a co-parenting situation? I hated all three of my options. There was not a solution that was ideal for me, obviously. But what I knew is that I didn't want her to have the same lived experiences in her early childhood that I had, that had created these wounds that I was trying to heal from. It's interesting that you say that you liked the piece of advice that my dad gave me. I do too, most of the time. But what I failed to recognize was the permanency of adoption at the time, because it just feels ironic looking back at that he was saying to not make permanent decisions in a firestorm, yet he was asking me to make an extremely permanent decision. I believe he thought that it was what was best, but it left me with no autonomy to have the desire to raise my daughter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Given the dynamic with you and your father, I could see where you would feel that you didn't have any autonomy to make the decision.
Right. So from there, I literally Googled adoption agencies near me. Now, I knew nothing about infant adoption. I did know about adoption from the context of family adoption, because when my mom had passed away, my stepmom later went on to adopt us. It meant little to nothing to me. She had married my dad, whatever. Same thing with my dad. He had been adopted by his stepdad. My biological mother had been adopted, et cetera, et cetera. So I had heard this word a lot, but I did not understand the gravity, the legalities, or the relational dynamic of what it looks like in this context of, I don't know these people and I'm interviewing them to like speed dating style, see, are you qualified from my perspective to raise my child? So anywho, neither here nor there. Googled adoption agencies near me, found an agency. Their process was really bizarre to me, but they come to you, and most agencies do this part, but they come to you with these profile books. So they say, what are you looking for in adoption? Why are you considering adoption, etc. And I told them, I don't want an adoption. I want to raise my child. I'm not sure if I can do that safely because of who I believe her biological father and his family to be. My dad's strongly encouraging me to do this for a variety of reasons. So at a minimum, I want to see her every month is where it started. Once a month, I want to see her. I want to get pictures and just updates with major things. If she goes to the hospital or if she, breaks a bone, sporting events, I'd love to be there for that. Not that I need to be the center of attention, but I want to be able to celebrate her. I want her to know that I put love and thought and intention into all of these decisions for her, that I didn't just think about the first chapter of her life. I thought about her whole life. So the agency's first response to that was they said, well, once a month is a pretty large ask, which is one of the things that I'd like to start changing, and we'll get into that. They said the most we typically see is 4 times a year. And I was like, there's no way in hell. Like, there's just no way. But they were like, okay, well, let's just look at some of the families that we have and see where we can go from there. And they came with a stack of 12 books. And they're pictures of them, their family, their careers, if they have other kids, just like a get to know you dating page, if you will, in book format. All of the verbiage said, we can't wait to welcome a baby into our family. We're so ready to add another baby. All of this, our baby, my baby, baby. And I'm just seeing this blanket statement, and I understand they probably followed a template. So there's nothing like super alarming, but I'm just somebody that really thinks deeply about the intention of words. There was one book of those 12 books, and it said, we cannot wait to welcome you and your child into our family. And I slid the book towards my social worker, and they said, if they aren't interested, then I'm not interested. So that was where the journey started. I met with them. I found that she actually shared the same birthday as me. The adoptive mom shared the same birthday as me. There were all of these little coincidences throughout the way that made it feel like the stars were just aligning. They made this relationship like, we can't believe how selfless you are and how sacrificial. We so admire you for the decisions that you're making for her on her behalf. We want you involved, all of these great things. Well, I told them I'm not comfortable with 4 visits a year. I need a minimum of 6 every other month, but I want pictures every month. And I want the visits to be in person. If you guys move, I'll literally travel to you. Like, we'll figure it out. We'll make it work. And they said that all of that was fine, that they were comfortable with that. They knew that I wasn't totally solidified in my decision yet. On the night that I gave birth to my daughter, I just had this moment where I started having flashbacks of all of the times in my life where I felt like God was showing me, do you see where where I protected you here and here, like times where I literally should have died. And I'm mad because I'm holding my baby. I'm heartbroken. I haven't even made a decision, but I'm torn in two as a whole. And all I know is that I love this little person and I want to protect her with everything that I have. And so I'm having this moment of these flashbacks and I'm like, so what? Like, so what? And I heard in the stillness of that hospital room, I was the only one awake. I need you to trust me now. And I just got goosebumps all over my body and I broke down in tears and I didn't know why, but it felt like in that moment I was saying, this is what we're doing. And so I had the nurse call her adoptive mom back into the room and I'm still holding my daughter, crying my eyes out. And I was like, I don't know why, but she belongs to God before she belongs to me. And now she belongs to you before she belongs to me. And I just need you to make me one promise, and that you're never going to take her from me. And she was in tears too, and told me that she would never do that to me or to her, and that she knew how much I loved her. That was my first night away from my daughter. She slept in the room with her adoptive mom that night, and I stayed up so that I could feed her. So that was a night. Like that night, I remember so vividly the smell of the hospital room, all of the furniture, where I was sitting, just everything. Well, the next day, the social worker came in and said, because they make you be off of medication for 72 hours before you sign paperwork that assigns custody actually to the agency. We can get into that too if we have time. But Anywho, neither here nor there. She goes over this line, and I've got the social worker on my right and my daughter's adoptive mom on my left. And she said, "This is the one that relinquishes your rights." And it just, the words then hit me again. This is real. And I can't even see what I'm signing because I've been just bawling all night. And I looked at her again and I said, "Do you promise you'll never take her from me?" And she looked at me and what felt very sincere, put her hand on me and said, "It would be ungodly to do so." And so I signed that paperwork trusting that she meant that and that we had those moments together. Less than 3 years later, my daughter lives outside of the country now, and they have effectively closed our adoption.
Wow. Wow. When you mentioned relinquish your rights, the thing that came into my head is the permanency of that wording.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just wish that I had had more voice, more understanding. They don't tell you that you have the right to an attorney outside of the agency. There's just so much. And it's also fast too, because I mean, you're only pregnant for 9 months. So it really is, regardless, it's like drinking through a fire hose. But talking to a woman that has barely turned 21 and expecting her to understand this when I had just barely started my first real job at the time is insanity to me.
Well, and the other thing, in terms of dealing with the dynamics that you were dealing with your mom's death, everything, and really just maybe not having the guidance that you needed parentally to really make an informed decision or the support. Yeah, I mean, it would be overwhelming for me, and I think anybody would have been hard pressed not to make the decision that you did. And at the time, you made the decision that you thought was best for Emberlyn.
From the bottom of my heart, I really did. And I know now that it wasn't, but I try not to be resentful towards adoption because I think adoption can be a really beautiful thing. And I've had women read my book and come to me and say, I was able to make informed decisions about my adoption. And I felt like I was in control of so much more than I would have been if I didn't know what to ask. And they're into their adoption journey now and happy with it. So I think that I would be a lot more at peace. And I know that everything happens for a reason. I am so grateful that my hurt has been able to protect other mothers from the same hurt that I've experienced. But it's just one of those hindsight 2020 things. I would give anything to have my baby and not have been the example in all of these areas of adoption that so severely need reform.
You mentioned your book.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's talk about your book, Courageous Considerations. And if you want to, do you want to show it for the
I don't
YouTube
see if
crowd?
the first screen will let us. There we go.
Yeah, that's gonna work. It's a beautiful cover. Courageous Considerations. Tell us about the book, what you want readers to take away from it.
It's definitely very niche specific as my experience with my adoption. What I really did was I took the same principles as a premarital counseling book that people may work through prior to getting married, regardless of a religious affiliation, just things that we know statistics say that these 5 topics most commonly lead to divorce. So let's make sure that we align on these discussionally. I took that same principle and I translated it to an adoption workbook so that hopeful parents or hopeful adoptive couples and expectant mothers considering adoption can go through all 3 segments of the book and really identify what they are truly looking for out of an adoption, what areas they are willing to compromise on, what that compromise would look like, communication styles, love languages, special ways to honor their child's unique walk in life, traditions that they want to set forth. I mean, it covers everything that in hindsight, I wish I would have asked. And it's just a place that kind of removes that. My hope is that what it does is it removes the pressure off of the adoptive parents from feeling the need to impress expectant mothers. For every 1 child that is placed for adoption, there are 40 hopeful families. And so it creates this, oh my gosh, this is our chance. Otherwise, we're going to be waiting again for a long time. And we still might not get picked. Adoptive parents tend to sell themselves in the excitement. What I'm not saying in that is that they're being dishonest, because excitement can make us say a lot of things that we really may mean in that moment until reality really sinks in. Same thing as wedding planning, right? Wedding planning is all very exciting and stuff. And you get into the marriage and you're like, oh my God, he never puts his laundry in the laundry basket. Like it just is one of those things. Um,
You must have been talking to my wife because she had the same complaint.
she called me before.
I kind of Figured she did.
Said, can you hint drop for me? But and he goes, yeah. So segment 1 is self, and it's self and whoever is reading it. Why are you considering adoption? Whether you're hoping to adopt or considering placing your child for adoption. Do you have the resources that you need? Are you being influenced by outside voices? Section 2 is mutual interview questions or conversation questions, kind of like speed dating. How do you resolve conflict? What are the ways to show you love? What are your preferred methods of communication? And this is just like, let's get really in the weeds about what this looks like, because we're doing this for 18 years, right? Especially in the states where open adoption is now legally enforceable. Thank God. And segment 3 is all the fun stuff. Let's unwind and come up with things that we can do that will make this journey really memorable and special.
It sounds like it's just a go-to book for parents who are considering putting their child up for adoption, what to expect with open adoptions, the legalities of it, what to do to protect yourself. It certainly is a product of your own experiences with Emberlyn and her adoptive family. So
Yeah. I wish I understood it now, everything in that book. It would have made such a game changer for my daughter and I. What it really is it's pride and ego that have cut off the relationship between my daughter's adoptive parents and I, is all that it boils down to, because they live in a whole other country. They know that I am no threat to their position in her life. And I see this a lot, unfortunately, adoptive parents that become very territorial of their children, even if the biological parents, the natural families, present no threat, it's still a threat to their ego. It's a perceived threat to their ego, and a perceived threat to the position that the adoptive parents hold in the child's life.
let's assume that the adoptive parents and the biological parent have some type of ongoing relationship in an open adoption that maybe has gone smoothly. What would you advise to adoptive parents to be present, to be supportive, or to be present, but yet not territorial? Where's the balance with that, Sydney?
Mm. The biggest thing is, well, I guess there's 2 things. What it took for me is to recognize, and I had to recognize this with Emberlyn being my first, but I remind myself of this even now with the 2 children that I have. My children are a gift. I don't own them. My job is to shape and influence them to become the best version of themselves that they can be. And when I release those chains of ownership, or perceived ownership, because it's not real ownership, it's responsibility, then I don't have the same weight of the lessons that they'll learn, the times that they fail, the times where they hurt their friends' feelings or hurt my feelings. It's no longer a direct reflection of me. This is their life learning experience and the path that they have to walk to become who they are going to become, right? When I am able to reframe that as a child is not a possession, it's a gift and a responsibility, then I don't have that same perceived threat or ego or fear of other people coming in to love my children. There shouldn't be limitations on how much love a child should receive. Now, there's a different conversation that comes into place if you have a natural family, and this happens. I'm not saying that natural families are perfect and that adoptive families are crazy. I recognize that stereotypes exist for a reason. So there's a different conversation that needs to be had if we feel like boundaries are being crossed, right? Then we have to go back to the drawing board and say, I feel like this is what we discussed. This was something that crossed a boundary for me. And now we get to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to address that together as a team. But it really is over communication.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just finding the balance between, just not being overbearing with communication and just enough where, you're not infringing on the territory of the adoptive parents, but yet you're getting your needs met as well, too.
Exactly. Right. Like, because mine was pictures once a month, once it got around to month 2 and they still hadn't sent pictures from the previous month, I would send a text like, hey, hope you guys are doing well. When you have time, I would love to see some updated photos and what you guys have been up to. And even that type of communication for them was too much.
Well, and that's the way to go. Because my mother, God rest her soul, used to say you can attract more flies with honey than you can with vinegar.
Yes.
And
Right.
and I mean, and that's the way to go. And again, like you said, you have no control over how the other person's going to respond. And correct, I've learned in my own life that control's an illusion anyway. I only have control over what I'm doing in the immediate moment. Beyond that, it's a crapshoot.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the truth. Well, and like that over communication piece, there's degrees and variations of open adoption. I have a dear friend, her adoption is her son's adoptive parents, his parents will call her to come babysit him and their other kids so that they can go on date night. So it's like very open. She'll just come watch her son and their other children. They'll go do their parent date night, but she's very involved, and they just have gotten into this flow where she can be present to answer questions for her son. She can alleviate the parents for an evening or a weekend, and they know that those babies are safe because she loves them all to pieces. And then there's semi-open where, I mean, it could be something like pen pals once a year where it's just like a letter and a photo. And then there's the more common open would be an example of mine where there's either quarterly visits or every other month visits or something to that effect would be probably the more common middle tier. The biggest issue is not over communication or under communication, it's expectation setting. Because if we set the expectation early on that one of my love languages, and this is just an example, but is words of affirmation, and one of my strengths is communication, then you can expect that if I'm not receiving those two things from you, that my way to compensate for that is going to be to try to get you to engage in that. Like, hey, I feel like there's a disconnect here. How can we fix this? How can we bridge this? Because that's who I am. Now, some people are conflict avoidant. So for them, that feels like more pressure, and it actually turns in that relationship dynamic.
Well, the other thing, and for the little time that I've known you, you're very open with who you are, what you believe. There's no question about where you stand on issues, and people who are very open with their beliefs and wear them on their sleeves become targets anyway, and they become misunderstood.
It's the truth. Absolutely.
And but I mean, for me, one of the reasons that I liked you right off the bat is I said, she's gonna tell it like it is. She's authentic. You ask her a question, she's gonna give you an honest answer. Now you may not like the answer, but it's honest.
Sure.
And I can deal with that because if you had an issue with me, you tell me right to my face. I wouldn't have to hear it back door.
To guess, right. Yeah. Well, and I've grown in that capacity too, because I've always been that way, and I appreciate that observation. But it used to be to a fault where people that have that complex will sometimes use it, and it becomes they recognize that it makes people uncomfortable, especially for kids that grew up in abusive households. When you take a strong position and people are off put by that, they kind of back off. And then using fear becomes a defense mechanism.
Yep.
So I had to like recognize that even when I'm coaching kids, I'll see kids that just take this really predominant personality approach. They kind of own the room, but you can tell that it's like this deep-seated insecurity is the root. For a long time, that's what it was for me. I was the loudest, the most outspoken, not in an obnoxious way, but just that I wanted to have a voice because I didn't feel that I had one growing up. Now I've found the difference between truth and honesty. You may not like my honest opinion because honesty means that I'm going to say it how it is. Truth is, here's the truth of the matter. Here are the facts. Here's how we can present that in a way that removes emotion from it. So I've learned that there's being truthful and there's being honest, and those can look different.
And they can also integrate as well too.
Absolutely. Of course.
But yeah, I mean, you score high. You're off the charts on both truth and honesty. I'm gonna switch for a bit. I know you have coaching services, and it's through Curtin Call. Am I correct?
Yeah, may rebrand that, only because I don't want my last name on public record, but, yeah, it's Curtain Call, LLC or exterior home. I do a bunch of different things. I own 7 businesses. So my consulting business is actually called Mile High Profits.
Okay. Now, with your coaching services that you provide through your businesses, how have your personal experiences shaped the work that you do with individuals requesting your services?
Mm. I feel it's that difference between the ability to empathize and the ability to sympathize, right? So because I have lived through things that or degrees of things that a lot of people have had one or a couple happen, I can both sympathize and empathize with them. And it makes me more trustworthy to my clients. is the biggest thing. Once you can establish trust with them, then they have a reason to listen to your advice. And everything before that is really just not super useful, because I can't get you to want to change your mentality about something. But if I can get you to trust me, then you'll start considering why it may be in your benefit to change some of these things that are affecting your life.
It makes sense because if we're going to be able to give advice or make suggestions, we have to build that relationship first. They have to trust us, because if they're coming to see a coach or a therapist, there's issues that they're dealing with, and for them to want to work with you, they're going to be able to trust that you are going to be a safe place for them to do that and provide the structure that they need, yet give them the input to create the structure with you when that's indicated. And that sometimes takes a few sessions to establish, and then you can get going. Or as I tell my students, an individual is going to give you, no matter how resistive or open they are to change, they're going to give you a door. And they're going to, here's the door I want you to walk through. So that's the door you go through. If you try to walk through a door that they've closed off to, you're going to lose them. So
Yeah.
before you get to the other closed doors, you got to go through the open one first. And that's how you establish that relationship.
Right. Right. Yeah, no, it's a delicate balance for sure. And there's so many architectural personality types that go into knowing how to approach it, because I've had a couple stubborn young kids that they say this is the door that we want to go through, and it's like, sorry kid, we're going through this one. But I can do that a little differently, because I'm helping I'm helping kiddo, but I'm helping with the permission of mom and dad. So we're going to keep doing this until your parents say that it's not working. And some parents don't know how to effectively push their kids. So I can kind of come in and be that outside source of like, I'm going to take you to these uncomfortable places because this is where growth happens.
Yeah.
And then there's other people that get totally shut down by that. It's the exact same thing as in my workbook, understanding who you're compatible with and how people respond to certain types of stresses and pressures. Are they going to thrive in that environment, or is it going to totally collapse them?
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense because not every environment's for everybody. We have to find those settings, find those individuals that we're compatible with that are going to help us during times of challenge, and just, be supportive throughout the process, not only of working through the challenge, but through our ongoing growth as well, too. I know you are working to change open adoption laws in this country. And when we first talked, it was like, wow, I couldn't believe that there are only certain states of the union have open adoption laws.
I know.
That just blew my mind when you told me that. So tell us about the work that you're doing, the challenges that are involved. How's that all going so far, Sydney?
It's been a really incredible and eye-opening journey. There have been several laws that have been passed since the initiative that our nonprofit took, but also that were already in motion through either other nonprofits or just community members that came forward and said this really needs to change. The biggest one that was near and dear to my heart was post-adoption contact agreements, also called PACAs, were not legally enforceable in most states just a couple years ago, which means that when my daughter's adoptive parents chose to close the relationship with me for whatever their reasons were, there's nothing legally enforceable where I can take them to court and say, "Hey," even though we have a signed piece of paper, it says 6 in-person visits, photos per month. It doesn't matter because it was not something that was legally enforceable in our state at the time of my placement. Since then, post-adoption contact agreements are now legally enforceable, which gets both adoptive parents and natural families to really consider what they are willing to commit to when entering this type of agreement.
Now that's throughout, is that every state in the union
I
that?
think we're at 27 or 28 now, is that post-adoption contact agreements are legally enforceable. So we will see them continue to pick up in the other states now that we have that much momentum building. That one will eventually get passed. The other one that we really wanted to get approved, me specifically, was those agreements to be retroactively enforced, so that families that had placed within the last X amount of years could then go back and say, hey, my agreement hasn't been maintained, whether that's on mom's natural family side or adoptive family side, because the responsibility goes both ways. Kiddo needs consistency from everybody. Some of the other ones are Birth Mother Care Act is one that we really care about. It's, uncapped expenses where, like, if they don't have insurance, for example, if you choose to go through with the pregnancy, you're not going to come out on the other side of choosing adoption for your child with a medical bill. Um, Access to state-funded programs like housing assistance and food stamps, where some women don't know how to complete those applications or get access to those things. So there's somebody that will walk you through doing all of those things. The right to know that she can have outside legal representation at no cost needs to be disclosed much more transparently. For me, they didn't just come out and say, hey, by the way, you can talk to an attorney. They just said, we have an attorney. If you have questions, you can ask her. And it was like and so I'm like, well, if you guys have an attorney, why would I need to ask that? Like, it's not, do you know what I mean? There's a huge gap there of what you don't know. And then licensed facilitators, or rather unlicensed facilitators, should be banned is another one. That's quite literally just a commission paid position where commission paid is what I said, repeat. People go out and find expectant mothers that are considering placement and match them to an agency, but they don't have licensing to do this. There's a position this is a real position where if you're licensed, then you're not outside of your legal parameters. But there are unlicensed facilitators that can take an expectant mom, match them with an agency or a couple, take the couple's money and bail out of town. Or on the flip side, tell the expectant mother that everything will be covered, knows nothing about the agency, has no jurisdiction to be talking about agency provisions, and matches them to said family, takes money, and then just dips out. So those positions are banned in a lot of states now.
Yeah, I'm glad, because I could see that being a recipe for corruption and,
Oh, big time. Yeah.
favoritism. And if you give me so many adoption referrals, we'll give you a percentage of whatever we charge to facilitate the adoption, however that works. But boy, yeah, that's just a recipe for corruption. And
Right.
wow. Yeah, it sounds like you're doing some meaningful work to streamline the process, put some guidelines in terms of ethical open adoptions and legal open adoptions versus the opposite. So
Yeah.
I'll be continuing to send positive thoughts that your work continues, and that we have open adoption laws and guidelines in all 50 states of the union. The other thing I think that is important, and I think that you also emphasize, is education, letting individuals know, here are some benefit packages you can apply for, here are some services. Because I'll tell you, Sydney, if I had a dime for individuals that I worked with that didn't know what they were entitled to because they weren't informed, I'd be a rich man right now.
No, it's the truth. And it's also just like including adoption in the sex education courses in high school. A lot of young kids don't understand especially the difference between infant adoption and foster care. So I'll speak to the youth at schools, an alarming amount of the times I'll hear, oh, I could never do that. I wouldn't want my baby just laying in a hospital being taken care of by a nurse until somebody adopts it. And they think that it's like putting a child into an animal shelter where they sit in a bassinet until somebody comes along and says, I'll take that one. Like, that's not how it works. It's one of these. Foster care is obviously a completely different entity. Infant adoption, you get to interview couples, and there is a surplus of couples that you can interview. You can choose by identifying all of the questions in my book that are crucial to you, what you really want, and then you can find the family that matches with that and build a relationship with them from there. A lot of people think that it's like, I never see my kid again. They go overseas. I don't have a clue who the parents are. They wait in hospital for a family. So it's actually just like, even on a more fundamental level, just what is adoption? How does it work? What are the tools and resources that I have access to through that vein?
Yeah. It sounds good. And the more tools and resources we can offer to expectant mothers, and mothers who are want to put their children up or need to put their children up for adoption for whatever reason, the better off we are, and the better off the child is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just a huge proponent of women exploring, the why behind it. Because if I had one person come to me and say, you could do this. And the only person who did that to me was a nurse in the hospital. It wasn't my dad. It wasn't any members of my church. It wasn't family members, friends, people from high school. Like, nobody told me, hey, you can do this. And yes, there were extenuating factors that I mentioned with her biological dad and all of the other things that were going on in my life. But if I had given myself 6 months, just 6 months later, I owned a house, had a job making 6 figures a year, and was already on the start of my first book. So that's all I needed was one person to believe in me. And that is my hope for expectant mothers, that if you choose adoption, I support you. But I would really like to encourage women to dive into why am I thinking about this? Because the chances are that there are resources out there that you don't know about that would make it so that you have the ability to raise your baby if you would like to.
I would encourage my audience, wherever you are, if you are looking for somebody who's going to help facilitate your wishes for an open adoption, you're the person to go to, because I can't think of a stronger advocate and a better informed advocate than you.
I will go to bat. I will go to bat for you if you need somebody to. Absolutely.
I have no doubt that you would. That's just that's in your nature. You don't back down.
Yeah, I got a lot of fight in me, but for the right things, not for silly things.
Yeah. You have to choose your energy wisely, given your business interests, your family. You have to choose which hill you're ready to fight on.
Yes.
But anyway, I could talk to you for about another hour, but I know you've got things I know you got to take care of today. So, but with that, I'm going to ask you a couple more questions. And the first is, if you could leave our listeners, Sydney, with one ultimate takeaway today, one ultimate nugget, what would that be?
Self-development starts with forgiving yourself, and you are worthy of forgiveness.
Yes, and forgiving ourselves is sometimes the hardest thing that we do. Sometimes it's easier to forgive others, and we forget that we ought to show some grace to ourselves as well too.
It's the truth. That's what I had to do in order to get to where I am. I had to learn how to forgive myself to get here, and the self-development piece wouldn't have happened if I hadn't started to cross that bridge.
Absolutely. My last question is going to give you a chance to promote you and your services a little bit. If people want to get in touch with you, retain your services as a coach, follow the Common Ground podcast, purchase your book, what's the best way for them to do that, Sydney?
Boy, there's so many options. My website, you can find me www.sydneycurtin.com. And then we've got coachcurtin.com are the two URLs. Facebook is a way to reach me. It's Sydney Nicole. And the Common Ground podcast is also on Facebook. So you can follow us there. If you are interested in being a guest or listening to other stories, definitely reach out.
Sounds good. I'll make sure all of your contact information gets in the program notes before we go live. So with that, Sydney, thanks so much for spending time with me and my audience today for a great conversation. I know we're going to have more conversations in the future.
Always. It's a pleasure as always, and so good to see you.
It's good to see you too. And with that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.